On Christmas Eve, 1926, 100 years ago this Christmas, a man came through the doors of Bellevue Hospital. He was shaking, and he told the nurse that Santa Claus was chasing him with a baseball bat. He was dead within hours. Behind him, more men kept coming through those doors, all night long. They had all been drinking the same thing. The man who had to count them was Charles Norris, New York's chief medical examiner. Everyone assumed some bootlegger had botched a batch. But the poison in those bottles wasn't a mistake. It was wood alcohol, and the law required it. 14 years before Prohibition began, in 1906, the government knew the poison was in the supply because the government had put it there. So the question isn't whether they did it, it's whether anyone ever answered for it. The count came first. 60 men came through Bellevue over Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. 8 of them were dead by the end of Christmas. 23 more died in the 2 days after. Norris's office counted 400 in that city that year, 700 the next, and Washington had been told. 3 years earlier, the government's own chief chemist had admitted that nobody could tell wood alcohol was in a drink without a chemist and a proper laboratory. Nobody in that ward could have known. Washington had said so itself, and none of it was hidden. 5 days after that Christmas, the New York Times ran it on the front page. Government to double alcohol poison content. People read that and went out and drank anyway, because the alternative was not drinking. So why was there poison in it at all? For that, you have to go back to a tax office. Industrial alcohol is the same chemical as the alcohol in whiskey, identical. So when Congress wanted American factories to buy it cheaply without paying the whiskey taxes, there was a problem. Untaxed alcohol a person can drink is just untaxed whiskey. The answer came from Europe. It became American law on the 7th of June, 1906. Factories could have their alcohol tax-free on one condition. They had to ruin it first, poison it, so nobody would want to drink it. In 1906, that hurt almost nobody, because there was a saloon on every second corner. If you wanted a drink, you bought one. The poison barrel sat behind a fence, and the fence was around a door nobody needed. That lasted 14 years. Then they took the door away. Here is the whole story in 2 numbers. Wood alcohol boils at 64.7 degrees. Drinking alcohol boils at 78.4. The gap between them is 14 degrees. Get it wrong, and the man who drinks it dies. Which matters because a still is a machine for separating liquids by their boiling points. Heat the mixture, catch what comes off first. Kerosene comes out easily, and so do the heavy oils. Wood alcohol does not. It boils first. It comes off with everything else, and getting it back out means holding it at an exact temperature for hours, in a room nobody knows about. These men worked at night, at speed, for money, so the wood alcohol stayed in. It was policy. On the 17th of January, 1920, the country went dry. Every legal drink in America vanished overnight, and the largest pool of drinkable alcohol left standing was in the factory yards, the one they had poisoned. The fence was still there, only now it was the door. Nobody redesigned it. It was already law. Within months, an industry existed to pull that alcohol back out. Trucks vanished from loading docks. Barrels were signed for by companies that did not exist. Tens of millions of gallons a year left the industrial system and came back as whiskey with a handsome label on it. And the men running that trade were not amateurs. They hired chemists, real ones with degrees, who took the poisoned alcohol and cleaned it. So the government made the poison harder to remove. The papers called it the War of the Chemists. Both sides hired chemists, and the bootleggers' failures were what people drank. And this is why the ward filled the way it did. Wood alcohol by itself is not especially dangerous. It goes down like a bad drink. The damage starts afterwards, in the liver, which takes it apart into formaldehyde and then into formic acid. And it is the formic acid that kills. That takes hours. Long enough to finish the glass, feel drunk, walk home, and go to bed. Formic acid collects in one place first, the optic nerve. So the blindness came before the dying, and the men who lived mostly stayed blind. And it does not take much. 30 milliliters of the pure thing can kill an adult. That is a shot glass. Not a crate, not a long night. One shot glass, once. Which is the moment to say the thing almost everyone gets wrong. Drinking was never illegal. The Volstead Act banned making alcohol, selling it, and moving it. It did not ban drinking, and it did not ban owning what you already had, so if you were rich enough to fill a cellar in 1919, you drank legally, in your own house, for years. The men on those gurneys had broken no law anyone was enforcing. They were dying under a recipe the government wrote. And before the government takes all the blame, here is the part against us. People were already dying of wood alcohol. In Chicago, in 1923, bad liquor killed about 215 people, and nothing federal had changed that year. Washington did not invent this, which makes it worse, because it means the state had years of bodies telling it exactly what a stronger formula would do. The Library of Congress lists a report from the head of Treasury's Technical Division, dated the 3rd of September, 1926, on the poisoning formulas. Nothing dramatic, a technical document in a technical office about which chemicals go into industrial alcohol and in what proportion. It is a September document. Nobody has died at Christmas yet. The Christmas dead came in on the 25th, the 26th, and the 27th. The papers carried the new formula on the 30th. It took force on the 1st of January. That is the order it happened in. Worth saying what it is not. It is not revenge. Nobody read about 8 dead men and reached for more poison. The stronger formula had been moving through that building since September. The deaths arrived after it was already moving and did not stop it. And the papers really did carry it. The 30th of December, 1926. New York Times, front page. Government to double alcohol poison content. Same day, the Chicago Tribune, alcohol gets double poison ration January 1st. 2 papers, 2 cities, the same order, printed where anyone could read it. There was no leak. There was no whistleblower. The government announced it. It was policy. What that headline was describing had a name, Formula Number 5, effective the 1st of January, 1927. Per 100 parts of drinkable alcohol, 4 parts wood alcohol, 2 1/4 parts pyridine bases, half a part benzene. Written out like that, it reads like a recipe, because that is what it is. And in that mixture, 3 ordinary drinks were enough to take a man's sight. Now, why make a poison stronger when you already know people are drinking it? There is an answer on the record, and it is not the one anybody expects. The reasoning was that a stronger formula would frighten them off, that once Americans heard what was in it now, they would stop drinking altogether. Which means the plan did not merely accept that people would die. The plan required people to find out. The deaths were not a side effect of the message. The deaths were the message. On the 1st of January, 1927, the day the new formula took force, 41 people died at Bellevue, one hospital, one day. That figure comes from one source, and I will not pretend otherwise. But it was reported at the time in the building this story started in. There was a public answer to all this from a lawyer named Wayne Wheeler. He was not a government official. He ran the legal side of the Anti-Saloon League, the lobby that wrote Prohibition, and in the 20s, his telephone calls moved the Treasury. His position was simple. The government is under no obligation to furnish the people with alcohol that is drinkable when the Constitution prohibits it. And then the sentence that did the real work. The person who drinks this industrial alcohol is a deliberate suicide. The Secretary of the Treasury did not agree with him. Andrew Mellon said publicly that he opposed using poison to enforce prohibition. He also said Formula Number 5 would stay until somebody invented a harmless one. Read those 2 sentences in the order he said them. Both statements are on the public record. There is no villain in that room, only an objection and a policy carrying on. It was policy. They did try to buy the alternative. $100,000 was offered to anyone who could invent a denaturant, harmless to drink and impossible to remove. Nobody was ever paid it. Meanwhile, a senator from New Jersey, Edward Edwards, called it legalized murder. And the Chicago Tribune wrote that normally no American government would engage in such business, that only the curious fanaticism of prohibition could make such means look justified. Not a fringe objection. The Senate and the editorial page. The formula stayed. And it was not a New York story. In January 1927 alone, 307 died of poisoned liquor in Philadelphia, 163 in Chicago. In one Kansas county, around 15,000 people were reported poisoned, which raises the question nobody in this story ever answers properly. How many altogether? For that, you need the room where the counting happened. Charles Norris ran an office New York had only just invented. Before him, the city's dead were examined by elected coroners who were often not doctors. Norris was a doctor, and he was rich, which mattered. When the city would not pay for laboratory glass, he bought it himself. The man he hired to use it was a toxicologist named Alexander Gettler, who could take a body and tell you what had been in the glass. Norris talked to reporters. Gettler did the counting. And here the story stops being a detective story. Gettler could prove there was wood alcohol in a body every time. What he could not prove was whose wood alcohol it was. A stolen barrel and a bad batch in a shed make the same corpse. There is no signature on a molecule. So the one thing that would have made this a crime, this dead man, that federal order, was the thing nobody could ever supply. The same missing proof protected every person involved. And then there is the thing almost nobody knows. It is in a 1927 report to the mayor. The city's health department would not accept a death certificate naming alcoholism, so the family doctors stopped writing it. A man dies in his bed after a bad bottle, and the doctor who has known that family for 20 years has a choice. Write the word that brings a post-mortem, or write natural causes and let them bury him on Thursday. They wrote natural causes. Everybody in that scene is being kind, and the count was leaving the record one certificate at a time, at the bedside, by people trying to spare a widow. In 1928, the question did get asked once, properly. A federal grand jury looked at the deaths and considered whether Washington bore any responsibility. It concluded that it did not. The reasoning was that wood alcohol is not a beverage. It is a recognized poison. That is true as far as it goes. The real question was, who put it there? It was policy. Norris had said what that verdict would be 2 years before the jury reached it. He told reporters the government knows it is not stopping drinking by poisoning alcohol, and yet it continues its poisoning processes. And then he drew the line exactly where the law would draw it. The United States government, he said, must be charged with the moral responsibility for the deaths that poisoned liquor causes, although it cannot be held legally responsible. Both halves of that turned out to be right. He said it out loud anyway, knowing no case would ever be brought. On the 5th of December, 1933, Prohibition ended. Legal whiskey came back. The market for stolen industrial alcohol collapsed, and within months, the program had no reason to exist. Notice what that is. It simply stopped mattering. The men it killed were already buried. There is one more voice to hear, and it is not an opponent's. Seymour Loman was the Assistant Secretary of the Treasury in charge of Prohibition from August of 1927. Talking about the people still drinking, he said the fringes of society were dying off fast from poison hooch, and that if the country came out sober, a good job will have been done. He held the job for 6 more years. So, did anyone ever answer for it? No. No prosecution, no commission, no inquiry, no official finding that anybody was responsible for anything. Nobody was charged, not one person. The question was asked once in 1928 and answered on what wood alcohol is, and then it was never asked again. This was never a cover-up because nothing was ever buried. Every word of this was printed at the time. It is simply that nothing followed. It was policy. Charles Norris died on the 11th of September, 1935, of heart failure. He had outlived Prohibition by nearly 2 years, so he was not spared the ending. He watched it stop. 7 years earlier, he had written the sentence I would put on the whole business, plainly, in print, with his own name on it. In a word, wood alcohol is not poison liquor. It is simply poison. One last thing. The requirement never went away. Walk into a hardware store this afternoon and pick up a can of denatured alcohol, and you are holding a product the federal government still requires to be poisoned. It is still methanol, which is wood alcohol. The same chemical is doing the same job under the same principle. The law that put it in that can is still on the books. The only thing that changed is that now you can buy the other kind. See you next time.